Ci siamo? Eccoci, perfetto. Buongiorno e benvenuti. Welcome everyone to this, oh my God, fourth session, la quarta sessione. Time does fly, doesn't it? Il tempo vola. So we started on Monday. Abbiamo cominciato lunedì and I walked you through, we discovered the seven capital sins of an Italian speaker, of an aspiring Italian speaker, of every Italian learner. We dealt more or less with the first three on the first session. They were all about your mindset, about your lizard brain, about your structure, structuring your learning, and introducing clear goals. The other four keys, the other four capital sins were all about your interaction with the language, right? And this is exactly what we've been doing since. So the day after, we talked about grammar, right? Martedì. We made sense of Italian grammar with a holistic approach. On Wednesday, we talked about mastering vocabulary. Yesterday, we discovered how vocabulary actually can be retained by tricking our brain into thinking there's some emotion and imagination mechanisms connected to that vocabulary. And today, we are going to talk about what I can claim as probably my favorite topic, l'argomento preferito of the bootcamp. Now, before we dive into pronunciation, let me just, as always, tradition is tradition, è la nostra tradizione. Let me just very quickly show you the takeaway post that, well, in my opinion, was the most reassuming, or one of the most reassuming of the entire session. So Rachel says, this was an excellent presentation that made so much sense to me. Key takeaways: we need to write our words and sentences by hand rather than on a computer or phone to enable the learning process. Very well put. Thank you. Connecting a new word we learn with something meaningful to us, such as an image or an emotion. Again, very good. Sum up, write a sentence using the word, and listen to the pronunciation using an app or any other source, really. So thank you very much for this very well, a great sum up of the session. And many of you actually wrote excellent takeaways. I wish I could bring all of them, but we made sure to reply to every single one of you. Now, at the end of yesterday's session, I asked you to look up 3 adjectives and comment on our assignment post. Domanda. And now you actually know why we do this. The chat is all yours. Go ahead and tell me your 3 adjectives. Okay, we have leale, premurosa. Oh my God, this is so quick. Bello, felice, di classe. Contento, capace, rilassato, o contenta, capace, rilassata. Divertente, amichevole, laboriosa. Competente, sicura, abile. Becky, I'm guessing sicura, right? That's what you meant? Curioso, avventuroso, semplice. Okay, guys, so today, very well done, everyone. And it feels like almost all of you remember your adjectives. And after yesterday's lesson, of course, you know why you remember them, because they are emotionally charged. After all, these are adjectives that you have connected strongly, have created that strong connection to your own experience. These were the adjectives that had to describe you at your best. And what better way to create an emotional connection, a relevant, the idea of something being very relevant. So remember this, take this with you into anything you do with your Italian on your journey. Make sure that every single word you learn, it's somehow connected to your personal experience, to your personal journey, that it has an emotional dimension, una dimensione emotiva, an emotional dimension. Okay, that's another thing to put in big capital letters, lettere maiuscole, above your desk, and keep it as part of your Italian shrine, Italian temple, right? I'm sorry for the video, there's a bit of sun, c'è un po' di sole, but I refuse to block it completely because we haven't seen the sun in like 7 days. Non l'abbiamo visto da 7 giorni. So do forgive me, it will go away in a few seconds. And it will be okay. I want this ray and a half that it has left in it for a second in this room. Ok, ragazzi. Allora, cominciamo. Now that I know that you have retained everything from yesterday, we can actually begin today's lesson and talk about la pronuncia. Una domanda, since we have the chat on. Let's put it like this. How many of you are in love with Italian because of the way it sounds? And how does it make you feel? Even if it doesn't make much sense, but it's true on a physical level even. How does it make you feel? Makes me feel alive, okay, comfortable, happy, in love. Oh my God, musical, felice, also happy. Magnificent, orgoglioso, romantic, felice, comfortable. We have so many felice, appassionato. La bella lingua, happy and joyful. Irvin, right? Happy, connected with my true self. Oh my God, Ava, I love this. So dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, I think, messages in the chat that, oh, Kathy, this is beautiful, that say that this is, in fact, a language that makes you feel happy, that it evokes emotions that are incredibly strong, and they are also incredibly, they are powerful and they are personal. Now, I have a theory, and that theory says, remember how we talked about harmony, about balance, about this flow of the language, that we have these vowel sounds and consonant sounds, and the language that is always trying to find the balance, the flow. So I truly believe that Italian has the same mechanisms as harmonic or classical music. Hear me out on this one. You know how there are actual scientific studies that say that the sounds of classical or harmonic music are actually affecting our bodies, our brain on a neurological level. And a lot of it allows us or provokes in us this sense of almost physical well-being, quite literally, right? It relaxes us, it makes us feel happy and joyful. And I think, and judging from my own experience, but also the experience of many hundreds, if not thousands of people that I asked this question, that the Italian language has the same mechanism. The sounds of Italian have the same harmonic and melodic patterns that provoke in the listener the same effect, the same neurophysiological almost effect. And that's why it triggers emotions. I believe that's the case. That's why most, like the history of the Western music, who are the musicians here? The Italian music, Italian opera, that's where our Western music started from, right? Italian in general is perfect for singing. All the musical vocabulary today in music studies is Italian, so there's a reason for that. There's a reason, there's this incredibly strong connection, una connessione forte tra l'italiano e la musica. And you don't need me to translate this one, right? So if you understand the importance of the flow, and we already said that, if we understand the importance of this flow of the language, this harmony, we understand or can make sense of half of the grammar rules. And that's very powerful. If we understand that the language is the mirror of the culture, we understand that how things sound and how they are pronounced this is incredibly important in the Italian culture, and as a consequence, in the Italian language. And yet, surprisingly, or you might say not very surprisingly, when you are taught Italian with the traditional teaching methods, pronunciation, anything that has to do with sounds, somehow is being pushed to the sidelines. Have you noticed that? L'avete notato? It's somehow the attitude is, well, you know what? Let's learn all the basics and the grammar rules and some vocabulary. And when you're more advanced, then we'll talk about crafting your pronunciation. Except this is incredibly wrong, because you cannot get to a point where you are advanced if you don't know how to pronounce things correctly. Okay? There's no way to get there. And today, I'm going to share with you the most important elements that will allow you to overcome that challenge. Okay? So, as this kitty tells us, la pronuncia è un argomento avanzato. This is the attitude of the traditional teaching methods. It's an advanced topic. Now, what's the problem? The main problem is that as adults, we are always taught a language starting from writing. Like, of all language skills, it's easier to teach us through writing and reading. Impariamo le lingue attraverso la scrittura. We learn languages, or I think it would be more correct to say we are taught languages through writing. And I know, I think all of you know that. You have probably experienced it, you know that's how it's taught. And yet, guys, if you think about it, when you're learning your first language, you don't start with writing or reading. You start with listening, then you go into imitation mode, you imitate what you hear, and then you speak. And then 6 years later, maybe 7, you learn how to read and write. And somehow, and that's how the brain interacts with the language, right? And yet somehow this instinctive human capacity that is speech kind of, again, pushed to the sidelines in traditional teaching methods. Writing isn't an instinctive human capacity. So to start with writing is not a very smart and effective thing to do. So this nice gentleman called Charles Darwin once said something that I just love quoting. He said, "Man has an instinctive tendency to speak, as we see in the babble of our young children. while no child has an instinctive tendency to brew, bake, or write. Okay, so yeah, this is a bit funny, but it's so true. We are being forced to do something that is not the first instinctive thing that we would do when it comes to using a language, because the first thing to do is to make it, to have it come alive through your voice, to speak it. That's supposed to be the first step. Now, as you might have already guessed, pronunciation and phonetics are the vital link of Italian. It permeates every aspect of the language. There's a reason all the musical stuff comes from the terms, the concepts. Music itself comes from the Italian tradition. Now, that's all very nice, but that's theory. Why should we work on pronunciation? Perché lavorare sulla pronuncia? Now, you would automatically say, okay, so if we mispronounce something, people will misunderstand. So that's right. We craft our pronunciation to be understood. Per essere capiti, to be understood. But we actually need it to understand as well. I've mentioned it very quickly yesterday and the day before. Let's talk about it now. What do I mean by that? The thing is, guys, and this is another thing that no one tells you, that if you mispronounce something, a word or an expression, when you hear it, you will not recognize it. So every time you listen to something, you hear something, and until you see it in writing, you have no clue what that was. And then you read it and you'll go like, oh, of course, I know that. Did it ever happen to you? Let me know in the chat. Who had this wonderful experience of reading something they couldn't understand? C says Denise, Jack, Christopher, Carmen, all the time, says Rhonda. Okay, so this is this happens. This happens quite a lot, and it's absolutely normal, guys. It's not your fault. Patty says with Mandarin. Well, Patty, that happens with Italian quite a lot too. Songs, lyrics all the time. Yep, that makes sense. So why does it happen? Because if you don't pronounce a certain word correctly, when you hear it, you just don't understand it. So when you then read it in your head, you're pronouncing it the way you would pronounce it. And you go like, oh, yeah, of course, I know this word. Lo conosco. The third reason we are giving all this immense importance to pronunciation when it comes to our 3D method is that if your pronunciation is well crafted, if you know how to pronounce Italian correctly, your confidence soars. And it seems like a small thing, but trust me, it's not. Because remember that pie chart with 50% mindset? That 50% mindset, if you don't have confidence, I think we all know what that means for our speaking skills. With all the vocabulary and grammar in the world, without confidence, you won't be able to speak, right? It's impossible. And the fourth reason is through pronunciation work, we are also shaping our Italian identity. Formiamo l'identità italiana. And I can't stress enough how important that is on your Italian journey. But we'll get to this. Allora, I think that by now you will agree with me that it's incredibly important to craft your pronunciation, to work on your pronunciation from the very first steps in your Italian. So we don't wait for you to be advanced before helping you to craft your sounds, to find your voice, because it just cannot be. It cannot happen. You cannot become advanced if you do not know how to pronounce Italian correctly. So What we're going to do today, I'm going to walk you through the 7 pitfalls of Italian pronunciation, le 7 trappole della pronuncia italiana. And then, guys, what I would like to do today, when we are done with the pitfalls, con le trappole, I would like to take questions because from experience, I know that the 4th day is the day when all the questions come up. And if we have time, I hope we will today, we will maybe even turn off the recording. We'll see how things go. And I'll still stay with you in the classroom and take your question. Va bene? Yeah? Bene. Allora, le 7 trappole sono le vocali, vowels. That's where most English speakers fall. I dittonghi, diphthongs. That's where everyone falls. Le consonanti, consonants. That's again very typical of English speakers, but also German speakers and yeah, many others. Le doppie. That's again very, very, very common. Double consonants are a huge pain point. And then we have combinazioni di lettere, letter clusters, you know, all the ñ, ñ sounds and others that we'll see together. Then we have stress, l'accento. Please note, accento does not mean accent. It's a full phrase. I mean, it does in certain contexts, but accento for us at the moment means stress. At the end of the lesson, it will mean accent. And then number 7, intonazione, intonation. So these are the most important elements that we need to pay attention to. So we will dive into 5 of these trappole, of these pitfalls, and mention a little bit the others, okay? So let's explore the first 5 and then see what we can do with the other 2. Le vocali, vowel sounds. Italian vowels are just these 5 sounds, basically. A, E, I, O, U. So when we work on pronunciation, and especially since we don't need to worry about your mics, always repeat after me. Whatever I say in Italian, just repeat after me. So here, go ahead. A, E, I, O, U. These are the 5 vowel sounds of Italian. A couple of them split into open and closed sounds, but we're not going to go into it now. But we are going to go into a very fun game, which is also a great exercise. I'm going to ask you to pronounce these English words in English, just the way you would have done it. Go ahead, take a second and take a second and pronounce them. Seriously, go ahead and do it. So when you pronounce them in English, it might sound something like opera, family, community, position, idea, international, right? Now, all of these words, they also have their Italian cognates. We have already mentioned cognates very briefly. Cognates are words that they walk the same, look the same, and talk the same, look the same, walk the same, talk the same, and they mean the same thing, okay? So these are, on the right side in red, we have the Italian equivalents of your English words. So I would like you to go ahead and read aloud the Italian equivalents. All done? Great. Now, I would like you to do the same thing with the English words. We're going back to the English opera family community position idea and the international. And in this exercise, and go with me on this one, we are mocking an Italian friend. So we are going to use the worst Italian accent in English that you can possibly imagine. Imagine you have a great friend, he's Italian, he speaks with an awful Italian accent in English, and you want to mock him or her, and you want to imitate the way they speak. So go ahead and pronounce these with a strong Italian accent. So what you said might sound like opera, family, community, position, idea, international, right? Something like that. That's how, more or less, we mock, if we have to, our Italian friends. Now, if you listen to yourself when you speak these words in your normal standard English accent, and when you're mocking the Italian friend, what happens, trying to imitate a strong Italian accent, what happens that you actually transform all the schwa sounds that you can see here, signed with this little symbol. In English, this is the most common vowel sound in English phonetics. And it usually replaces any vowel that is not stressed. So when you're saying opera, the E and the final A, they don't really sound, they don't have a full sound, they're being shrunk. They shrink into an sound. Do it with me. So we say opera. So we have two sounds, two schwa sounds. Family, a very similar thing. Instead of this I, we have an sound. So it's family. We almost kind of gloss over it. We don't say family as we do when we mock Italian friends, right? We shrink the sounds, the vowel sounds, into a schwa. And the same with community. The O sound becomes, it's not an O sound, it's a community, right? Position has two schwa sounds. Look, position, the first O, and this I-O sound is a position, shun, So we have two of them. The same with idea, the last A becomes a. And in international, we have actually three of them. So why am I telling you this? Because if you are aware of this, you can avoid the first trap, la prima trappola. Because guys, what happens is that you are importing, or the absolute majority of you, if you're an English speaker, you're importing the schwa sound, the sound, into Italian from English, and it's especially obvious when the words are as similar as these guys. And the only way to make you take a step back from it is to imagine you have an Italian friend and you want to imitate them, just like we just did. So what I would like you to do now is to pronounce the Italian words again, but keeping in mind that Italian never gives up on a vowel. Vowels are sacred. Le vocali sono sacre, they are sacred. So in Italian, we fully and confidently pronounce every single vowel. So what in English is opera, in Italian is opera, opera. And I bet you did this much better in the second part of the exercise when you were supposed to be speaking with an Italian accent, and not when I just asked you to read aloud the Italian words, right? Let me know in the chat if this makes sense. So family is famiglia, famiglia. We don't shrink anything. All the vowel sounds are there. So let's do the rest with me. Comunità, comunità. Posizione, posizione. Idea, idea. Internazionale, internazionale. And I think the last one is a great example of the difference between how vowels are treated in English and how vowels are treated in Italian. So remember this as a rule. Vowels are sacred. We do not mistreat them. We do not skip them. We do not shrink them. We pronounce every single one of them. Let me know in the chat if this makes sense. I somewhat understood this before, says Jo, but this explanation is really helpful. I had already started to slow down when learning. Okay, Denise, well done. 100%. Yes, yes. Okay, guys, now there's no more excuses. Now every single vowel you come across, give it the attention it deserves. And remember, the flow of Italian requires us to treat vowels with utmost respect. Okay? So, the rules when it comes to le vocali, our vowel sounds are: uno, avoid borrowing vowels from your native language. They might look the same, they might look alike. We spell it's a Latin alphabet, but these sounds are different and sometimes wildly different. Due, make sure to pronounce every single vowel and never, ever, ever allow it to become a schwa sound. Always think about opera, opera, right? We sing our vowels. We do not shrink them into a schwa sound. Our second pitfall are the consonant sounds, le consonanti. Now, I'm going to make you look at the same words. And now that you can pronounce all the vowels, I'm going to ask you to pronounce all the sides of it. So the English side and then the Italian side, the English side, then the Italian side. Okay, I'm guessing you're done. Now I would like you to tell me if the consonants in bold if they're the same sounds and which ones aren't. No, we're coming to diphthongs, don't worry. Okay, we're only talking about the consonants in bold. Okay, Gray says R in opera is the same. Jack says R the same. R is different. Position is not. Okay, they said, who said position is not? Oh, sorry. If you don't have a name, I can't guess it. Okay, Mary says, yes, the same. Jerry says P is different. All the same says Joy. Okay, they're pronounced stronger. R and Zeta. Zeta is different. C is different, says Ron. Okay, guys, so The answer is they are all different sounds. None of these sounds are the same in English and Italian. The R is definitely not the same. So think about opera, r, ra, 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 and opera, ra, ra, ra. Not the same R. The R sound and the R sound are not the same sound at all. But some of you said, yeah, okay, the R is different, but the P is different too, guys. È un altro suono. When you say opera, the English P sound, it's not a P sound like it is in Italian. You say opera. You know what? Put your index finger in front of your mouth and say opera and insist on the P sound. Opera, 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 and feel the flow of the air. Go ahead and do that. Opera. And now, pronounce after me. Opera, opera, opera. Put your finger in front of your mouth and feel that opera, b, b, is not the P from opera. P, P. Do it with me. So one has a lot of air that flows to make the P sound. The Italian P is a P sound. It's not a P sound. And I have this perfect microphone that is supposed to be catching every single difference of the two sounds. So we are done with the P, P, and R sounds. Now, what about community? Comunità. Community. K, k, k. Comunità. K, k, k. Comunità. K, k, k. Community. K, k, k. Comunità. Can you feel the difference? The K and K sound. And the same with the T sound. T, 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 T. Not a lot of air, almost no air. So community, T, T, comunità, ta, ta. Listen to the difference, and you can always test if you're doing it correctly with your finger. Position, posizione, the same as an opera. P, 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 position, p, 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 posizione. Okay? So remember this, guys. As with vowels, avoid borrowing your consonants from your native language. They might look the same, the P and P, the K and K, the T and T, but they do not sound the same. So some consonants will be very, very similar, but very often it will be a different sound. And when you just automatically use the sounds that you're used to, because these are the sounds that these letters represent in English, you can't import them into Italian. You need to pay attention to how this sounds actually, how these letters, into which sounds these letters translate in Italian. And of course, that's the point. Make sure that the consonants you're using when pronouncing Italian words, they are actual Italian consonants and not some illegally imported English ones. So we're going to talk about minimal pairs, but these are actually the double consonants in our case. Okay, there are many kinds of minimal pairs. Minimal pairs means that two words are exactly the same except for one little element. And when we're talking about double consonants, le doppie, what we mean is that one word has the double consonant and the other word has the same consonant, but it's just one. Like coppia and coppia. Coppia means copy, and coppia means couple, which is also a cognate, as you can see. Well, both, you could say, both are cognates. Pena, penna, pena, penna. Pena means punishment. Pena means punishment, or it can also mean some kind of pain even, okay? Suffering, more than pain, suffering or punishment. Penna is a pen. Another wonderful example of minimal pair is capello, double L, but just single P, and cappello. So capello means just one hair, one singular, and cappello means also one, but a hat, not a hair. Now, why is it a pitfall? Because, guys, in English, we don't really have any situation in which just by making the same consonant stronger, and that's the effect of the double, it changes its meaning. Whether you say, I don't know, to your dog, good boy, or good boy, it doesn't really change the meaning, right? You double the boy, it's stronger, but it's the same meaning. So in English, we don't really have when it comes to double consonants, two minimal pairs. We have them with other phenomena. But in Italian, when you say pena instead of penna, you have changed the word completely. So when you're writing your new words in your little vocabulary notebook that hopefully you started yesterday, remember this. Pay attention and color code. See how everything comes together? When you see a double consonant, make sure you color code it. You're going to need it for spelling, but you're also going to need it for pronunciation. 4, letter combinations. Combinazioni di lettere. So this is a huge one, so pay attention. Everyone, or almost everyone, before they start learning Italian, they are convinced that Italian is a phonetic language, which means what you see is what you get, is what you read. And that's true in most cases, not true in all cases. So go ahead and read this aloud for me. And then this. Chances are you said casa for the first one and ciao for the second one. And the same letter called la C had the k sound the first time and the ch sound the second time. Gatto, that's him, and gelato. No need to translate. The same letter, la G, but g, hard g sound in gatto and the j sound in gelato. Why does it happen? Because when we have una I or una E, and I'm intentionally using the Italian names of the letters, so an I or an E, but that's the last time I call them with their English names, they soften the sound of the C or the G. So we have the same thing with SC letter combination, scuola, scuola, but if you have an I or an E, or an E, una I or una E, it will be sciamano, a shaman, or sciare, to ski. So what you need to remember that if you see la C or la G, Italian names of the letters, followed by I or E, the sound is softened, like in ciao and gelato. And the same thing happens when SC is followed by exactly the same vowels. The sound is softened and it becomes sh, sciamano. And then we have everyone's favorite gnocchi, the ñ sound. So it's not GN, it's not g gnocchi, it's gnocchi, ñ. And of course, you're supposed to be doing this with me. Gnocchi. Occhi. Ng, ng, ng. And its counterpart with an L, L, luglio, L. And that, of course, means July. Luglio, L, L, L. So these ones are big, big challenges, while with these guys, all you need to know to pronounce the correct sounds is the rule, basically, to remember that you need to have this little alarm go off in your head once you see these combinations. Here, you need to remember the letter combination, and you also need to remember that you need to know how to pronounce it correctly. The ñ and ll sound. And you need to practice to do that, right? And then we have the H sound, which is, so we call H, in Italian, H is called H, that's the name of the letter. And it's a letter that in Italian is completely silent. It does not get any sound. But if we insert it between the G or the Chi and the following dangerous vowel sound, we get a reverse effect. So in gelato, there's no H, so gelato gets the full, it follows the rule. But in the word ghetto, which is actually a very Italian and Venetian name for the Jewish quarter in Venice, that later got a very unpleasant etymological development, as we all know, having the H here brings the sound from J to back to G. And the same with chiesa. So cena, no H, chiesa means church, and back to K sound because of the H. Again, these are things that we really need just to know and practice. Okay, but the problem is that many, many, many people completely ignore these small but important rules well into almost fluency. Okay, they keep making these mistakes, and that's really tripping them up, because you can't be fluent without knowing this. Okay, just to see that we know, that we understand what we just said. I dittongi, diphthongs. Someone was worried about the diphthongs. We didn't follow the order, but here we are. Without this H, what would it sound like? Sue says it's a fantastic session. I can see why it's Tania's favorite. I think because it's the most fun, and because I have a soft spot for anything that has to do with sounds and pronunciation. Gina says G would be silent, soft G. Well done. Okay, here we go. Stephanie says G would be silent. Gina says soft G. Well done. So without this H, it would be diton G. Doesn't exist. Alarm doesn't exist. So to make a plural of diphthong, diphthongo, that's singular. To make a plural, we need to keep the G sound, not to let it become a G, but we have seen that a plural masculine noun gets an E at the end of the letter, the word. So we are forced to use an H to make sure that the sound is, that it remains a G, hard G sound, okay? So, another little exercise. Go ahead and read these for me. All done? And now, read the last word for me. So, I can't hear you guys, but let me know in the chat and be sincere as much as you can if this is what happened. When you read ciao, you read ciao. You didn't say ciao. But when you read buono, uomo e formaggio, you read something like buono, uomo, and formaggio. Let me know if this is true for you. All right, see, true, see, yes, okay. So not your fault, and we have a couple of no's. That's absolutely fine. That's good. Well done. But there's no well or badly done because it's not your fault. It just means that you haven't learned or someone haven't taught you diphthongs yet. So we say ciao correctly and not ciao for a very good reason. We have heard it so many times, right? But chances are you've heard formaggio much less. So I just told you, give a full attention to every single vowel. And now I'm telling you, okay, that's the rule. And this is when we know the rule well enough to start dealing with exceptions. So when it comes to diphthongs, we see a very interesting phenomenon when two vowel sounds become one vowel sounds. So it's not buono, it's buono, buono, do it with me. Buono, buono, buono. It's not uomo, it's uomo. And the same with formaggio. It's not formaggio, it's formaggio. Jo. The same way as ciao is not ciao. So, how do we know if something is a diphthong? We know when we see that there is, like, diphthong has to have two vowels, okay? If one of the vowels is una I or una U, I, U, and it combines with, the second one is a, e, or o. And the rule is, if I or U are not stressed, they become semi-vowels. They are squished together with the other one, and they become one sound. That's why it's buono, uomo, and ciao, okay? You see where the stress goes, not on either of them. And when they are in such a weak position, really, una posizione debole, they kind of lean towards you. They try to get support from the other vowel and kind of become part of it. Okay. So remember this little rule for diphthongs. And when you see two vowels, and again, you can say again that, we need a good flow of vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant. And in this case, we have two vowels that merge into one sound, one complex sound. And then we have stress. And stress is l'accento. And it's pretty important. Go ahead and read these words aloud for me. Okay, now let me know if what you said was città, nazionalità, and menu. Yes or no? See, yes. One no, second no, mostly yes. Okay, so some more no's, that's good. First two, someone says, okay, first two is correct. The last one, no. Okay, guys, the correct pronunciation of these three words is città, città. Nazionalità. Nazionalità. Menu. Menu. And you know what? We don't need to guess it or to know it. The word tells us where the stress goes. See this little accent sign? Now go ahead and read the last word for me. Did you say caffè or caffè? First one, okay. You said most of you, the absolute most of you said caffè. Why? Because you've heard caffè probably many times, right? So, città, nazionalità, menu, caffè. When you see the stressed last syllable, the stressed last vowel, sorry, that's where you put the stress. Now, in Italian, the stress on the final vowel is an incredibly, well, it's not incredibly rare, but it's pretty rare. There's not a huge percentage of words that has that stress. So words that have that stress. So the language makes sure to tell you when the stress is in a strange position. The problem is, and that's very generous of it, the problem is that it doesn't tell you anything the rest for all the rest of the words, and that's a lot. So when you do have this precious, precious information, please make sure that when you pronounce your new word and you see this accent, okay, and you can see that these are all words pretty widely used, so they're common. Make sure you pronounce them with the stress on the last vowel. However, most words will not offer this service, so all we're left with is this rule. L'accento italiano cade di solito sulla penultima sillaba. Penultima sillaba they're both cognate, is a cognate expression, penultimate syllable. So penultimate means, of course, one before the last. The problem with this rule is that, again, it is not perfect, but I have fairly warned you that no grammar rules in Italian or any other language are perfect. So when in doubt, remember this. But you know what? You can only be in doubt until you've listened to your new word pronounced, as we said yesterday. So if you still need to catch up on yesterday's wonderful lesson, go ahead and do it. And remember this. So when you're learning your word, if the word doesn't have this final accent, chances are it's on the penultimate syllable, but you need to listen to it pronounced anyway. And when you do, mark the accent inside your vocabulary notebook. And this is one more thing. If it's weird, if there's something irregular about it, color code it. So just to see an example of what a penultimate syllable looks like, go ahead and read these with me. Scuola, gelato. Scuola, of course, means school. Gelato, pizza e spaghetti. Non hanno bisogno di traduzioni. They need no translations. Okay, so ultimate or last syllable, la. The stress goes on the one before. Last syllable, to. Sorry. Stress goes on the vowel in the syllable before. Pizza, pizza. So last syllable, ta. The stress goes on the one before. And spaghetti, ti is the last syllable, and the stress is right here. So just to give you an idea how we look at this, your dictionary will normally, if it's a good dictionary, we talked about it yesterday, will tell you where it goes. And when you listen to it and repeat You need to say it aloud as well. When you repeat it, you know that the accent, where the accent goes, okay? Now, big question, how to overcome these challenges or these mistakes, questi errori. Come evitare questi errori? Uno, sorry, this is very straightforward, but not obvious, it seems. You need to learn the basic sounds of Italian, which means vowel sounds, what they sound like, consonant sound, what they sound like, and not to assume that they will be exactly the same as English consonants that look the same, okay? And of course, you need to be familiar with all the letter combinations, the absolute majority of which we covered today. Although we couldn't really go a lot into it, but we did try. Due, as I just mentioned, this process, however quick and brief, it has to become part of your vocabulary work. Pronouncing every single word that you come across that goes into your vocabulary notebook, listening to it and pronouncing it several times, not just once. And keeping an audio journal, which means you record yourself. You record yourself reading your assignments. You record yourself reading your homework or your diary entry or your exercises. There's a lot to record because remember, you're reading aloud every single thing you read or write. 4. Every listening exercise needs to be a pronunciation exercise. So there's a technique that we call shadowing or mirroring, and you need to remember to not just read aloud every single thing that you read or write, but also transform every listening exercise into pronunciation exercise. You can just follow and repeat after the audio, or you can pause and repeat and hit play again and listen and repeat. Okay, that's the best way to build pronunciation, really. But you also need to be careful about what you're listening to. But that's another thing. So these are the 4 elements that we need to make sure that happen to us to build pronunciation. 2 words about how to transform your listening pronunciation, your listening exercise into pronunciation exercise. So this is the shorter, quicker version. You listen to a sentence or a short paragraph. You write it out. You don't immediately pronounce it. Then you read it and you record yourself. Then you listen again and you compare your recording to the original, and then you pronounce it again. Now, if you want to make this more interesting, you listen to it, and as you're listening to it, you take dictation from it, okay? So that's going to really make this exercise powerful. And this is the system we use, slightly more elaborated, but this is what we use in our programs, where every text, every story, every text, every reading and comprehension exercise, it comes with an audio with it. An audio comes with it. So let's go back to the importance of pronunciation. We said being understood, all of these things allow you to be clearer when you speak. So people don't go, puoi ripetere? Can you repeat? It will improve your listening comprehension because if you pronounce something correctly, you also recognize it when you hear it. You gain confidence because, oh my God, when you sound Italian, that really boosts your confidence. And speaking confidence is something that speaking doesn't happen without, not surprisingly. And then there's this little guy, the acquiring a linguistic and cultural identity. And that sounds like huge, but it really isn't. Non lo è. So what does it really mean, identity through pronunciation? What do you think, guys? So John says, okay, John, I promise I will answer because I also promised to answer, to take some questions. So I will start with yours, promise. So we have to completely think in Italian, becoming Italian. Belonging, Sheila well said. Carl, autentico. Connects you with the culture, that you feel like you fit into the culture. Wonderful, Denise. Okay, I'm loving this, guys. Be Italian. Authenticity, yes. Not thinking like a tourist, not being a tourist. All right, okay. So, all true. I'm going to do this very quickly, but think for a second how much information your accent, even in your native language or any other language that you might use, how much information it carries. Or how much information someone else's accent carries for you. When you hear, if you're in the US and you hear, let's go for something you might know, if you hear a Texan, a strong Texan accent, does it say something? A strong New York accent, what does it tell you? What does it make you think? A very northwestern accent, how does it change communication with that person? Does it? Maybe it doesn't, but your perception of the person changes in a very, very significant way based on the sounds that person produces, right? The sounds the person produces in their speech are incredibly important for the perception of the person by the others and their perception of themselves. And this is true for us as well, okay? So when we talk about working on our pronunciation, it means that yes, we want to be understood, we want to understand, we want confidence, but there's this one more element into it. Correct pronunciation, pronouncing Italian with the right sounds, with the right intonation, the right stress. It means that you're also becoming a rightful member of the Italian culture because you know the code, not just the meaning of the words, that's not enough. Not just the grammar rules, that's not enough either. You know the entire code of the language. And that, my friend, is a powerful, powerful thing. And we're not just doing it to be perceived by others in a certain way. We're doing it to perceive ourselves. And I know it just brings us back to the confidence thing, but it's not just a confidence. As many of you said so nicely, so well, that's the Italian identity that you're building. And a huge chunk of that identity is built through correct pronunciation. In all of this, your question might be, so Tania, how do we sound native? And my answer to you is, you don't need to. And I'll tell you why. Really simple. There is no such thing to sound native in Italian. Anyone who says, I'm a native speaker of what? Because guys, only 1 to 2% of all Italian population, listen to this carefully, is a native speaker of standard Italian. Everyone else has as their native language, whether the local dialect, and that's the case of like 80% of, just in this city, I'm in Trieste, where the dialect is a big, big thing. Or if it's not the local dialect that is their native language, it's the local variety of Italian. And let me explain to you the reality of this geolinguistical reality, because you really need to understand this if you want to be part of the Italian linguistic culture. So this is how it goes. We have in every single geographical area of Italy, we have 3 layers, tre strati, three layers, linguistically speaking. We have the historic layer of the local dialect, which is not a variety of Italian at all. It's not like in Germany, it's not like in other places when a dialect means a variety of the main language. That's not the case. Italian dialects are actually different languages, basically all of them. And these languages are born from a marriage of Latin and the preceding local dialects. So the Latin arrived, there were already some languages on the ground, they mixed up, and the dialect was born. Okay? And that's the main basic layer. And then in every single region or city in Italy, we also have the regional variety, which is the Italian, the normal standard Italian, strongly affected by the vocabulary and the grammar of the local dialect. So in Trieste, even when someone is really making an effort to speak to you in standard Italian, they're going to use words that are not Italian. They are locally, they come from the local dialect. And very often they're going to use grammatical structures that are not Italian at all, except most of the time they're not aware of that. Because the Triestine dialect has different set of grammar rules. And then as a third layer, the thinnest one, we have the standard Italian, and we have some speakers of standard Italian. Now, how do people who have as their native language, and that's the absolute majority of Italians, as we said, what do they have? How do they get to be standard speakers or speakers of standard Italian? They go and study it. So anyone who uses the language professionally, which means TV speakers, radio speakers, politicians, any kind of public speakers, what they go and they study, they train themselves. There are thousands of schools, of courses, and there's a whole process that someone goes through when they want to become when they don't want to be recognized or affected by their local dialect or their local variety of Italian. So this is great news for all of us, guys. And it means that if there is no such thing as a native speaker, if the absolute majority of Italians speak with a dialect, with an accent of their local dialect, this means that we don't need to force ourselves or to pretend to sound native. There is no such thing. Now, I will admit that for many, many years on my own journey, I was obsessed with correct sounds, with correct pronunciation, with building the perfect standard Italian. And once I got there, once people started asking me, so where are you from in Italy? You have such a standard Italian. And I felt, oh my God, I did it, I arrived. And then I started paying really, real attention to everyone else. And when people told me, oh, your Italian is better than mine, I listened and I realized it's true, because the absolute majority of people that I know that are not public speakers or not professional speakers, they all have regional accents or dialectal accents or strong dialectal influences. Now, what does it mean for us? It means that, first of all, we need to learn the correct pronunciation of Italian. We need to know how to pronounce every single sound of Italian and every single letter. It means that we need to show respect to Italian by using the correct rules of pronunciation. All the things that we've seen today together and some more. We can't really, I could take 7 weeks just to cover the whole thing, but I think we did get to see the most important elements at this point for us. So these two things. First of all, you make sure that you know the sounds, the rules, the pronunciation, and the phonetics rules of Italian. Secondly, you show Italian the respect it deserves by using them and making an effort to be as perfect as you can by working on your sounds and pronunciation and trying to stay as close as you possibly can to the actual Italian sounds. And then we let go of the idea of sounding native and we look to craft our Italian voice. We get to decide what we sound like. We get to decide which voice in Italian represents who we are. And that, my friend, is something that is incredibly, incredibly powerful in building your Italian identity. Because that process of finding your Italian voice, crafting your Italian voice, and that can be the pitch if you speak lower or higher, the way you pronounce your sounds, you get to customize it and personalize it to reflect your identity, who you are. We do not fake, we do not force ourselves to sound native. It doesn't mean anything. Be yourself, find your voice while respecting Italian. Okay, that's my message to you. And yes, oh my God, okay. We are almost done. I promise I have an assignment for you, which means your workshop takeaways go under this video. Your Achilles heel word is something I'm going to ask you to share. So think about the word that is most difficult, just one word. Okay, you can choose two. And I want to know which is the word that you consider your Italian Achilles heel word. And this image is going to be in the Facebook group, and I'm going to ask you to share the most difficult word in Italian that you struggle with. And tomorrow is going to be our big grand finale, thinking in Italian, crafting your identity beyond pronunciation, of course. And if you had to skip one of the previous ones, do not miss this one because it is going to be pretty powerful. Now, I did not forget, we have a very special giveaway for you. It has two parts. It's an exercise for vocali, diphthongi, vowels, and diphthongs. It has both audio and PDF exercise. And Daniela, if you can please share it in the chat. Here we go, Dani, grazie. So guys, we have two links. One ends with exercise text and the other one ends with MP3. Go ahead, make sure you can copy them and then click on them, or you can just click on them and open the two downloads. Make sure you download both, and they are pretty powerful. Okay, now I'm going to thank everyone who is watching the recording. And if you got to the end of this hour and 20 minutes, kudos, well done, I'm proud of you. So thank you, and I will see you at our next 5th lesson of this bootcamp. Now, for all the wonderful people who are still in the chat, who are still in the classroom, I promise to answer questions, and answer questions I will. And I'm keeping the YouTube just in case someone is curious. So John, I will start with you. John said, and guys, I'm just a reminder to ask your questions in the chat. You start them just as John did with domanda, big capital letters, so I know it's a question. Okay? So John asked, if we pronounce every word, we may get some wrong. Which is the best side to check? So John, you might have missed yesterday's session. But yesterday, I actually gave you a list of apps and tools. And one of these apps was called Natural Readers, where you can transform any text in Italian to sounds in Italian. Okay, there are other apps that will do that. So any Italian speech to text to speech app will do that. But Natural Readers is, they have a really good quality, so I like them. So guys, if you have questions, go ahead and start them with the word question, domanda, and put them in the chat. If I don't see domanda, I am not gonna know it's a question. So I'm just going once more to share the two links, just in case, okay? If someone didn't download them. Oh, Dani is sharing with me, domanda, what can I do to learn to roll my tongue? Okay. So Tammy, you're not alone in this. And I could just say, you can practice. Angela, I see that you've raised your hand, but please put your question in the chat if you can, because it's a bit tricky to unmute you. Okay, so how do we roll our R's? Okay, let's do this. It's going to be very quickly. It's going to be very quick. So say this with me. Just the syllable la. La, 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 la. And as you sing your la, 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 please note where the tip of your tongue touches your alveolar ridge, which is the bumps that you have behind your teeth, just on your palate, right? When you say la, 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 la. So do this and note where your tongue comes with contact, when the tip of your tongue touches this alveolar ridge. And if your hands are clean, you can just feel that ridge with your thumb, right? Go in there and feel where the alveolar ridge is. Now, the R is pronounced by putting the tip of your tongue to that very same place as the la, but instead of making contact, solid contact with the alveolar, so if these are your teeth, this is the tip of your tongue that is touching just behind your teeth for la, 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 right? Instead of making solid contact, you leave a bit of space and you allow the air to pass through and let it vibrate. So it's not la, la, la anymore. It's ra, 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 la, la, la. Solid contact, solid touch, no air passes. We obstruct the air and let it go. La, la, la. And ra, ra, ra. We touch the tip of the tongue. We touch the alveolar ridge with the tip of the tongue, but we don't obstruct the airflow completely. We leave a bit of space and we let our tongue, the tip of the tongue, vibrate. Ra, 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 ra. Now, it's not going to happen just because you tried it, but this is the mechanism. Try doing this, okay? Try working on this, because that's how rolling your tongue actually works. Okay, hopefully this helps. Let me see. Gail, how do you pronounce Civitavecchia? Civitavecchia. Is there an Italian equivalent of l'Académie Française? Yes, Margaret, there is. It's called l'Accademia della Crusca. They're not everyone's favorite institution, but yes, there is. So in English, you don't have anything like that. English is completely wild and out there, and everyone, and by everyone, I mean British and Americans, everyone does what they think is right, and the language just develops without any supervision. Italian is a slightly artificial language. It's not really artificial, but what happened, I didn't want to go into it, but it is important. In 1862, 1862, 1862, when they decided to create a state and unite all these separate regions and kingdoms, they decided pretty randomly that the national language of that state is going to be the Tuscan variety of the Tuscan dialect. Now, they didn't take the Tuscan dialect as it was. They made some changes to it, but they decided it was a good candidate because Dante wrote more or less in it, Petrarca and others after them. It was a language with authority. Now, someone needed to manage it, and l'Accademia della Crusca was this institution that took responsibility for it. Ok, grazie Dani, questo aiuta molto.